Heavy rain set in during the day, the usual rain after a battle, and large numbers had to remain unprotected in the open, there being no room left under a roof.
Carl Schurz, Brigadier General of Volunteers in the Union Army, relates his encounter with the surgeons at work after the Battle of Gettysburg, the bloodiest battle of the Civil War.
I saw long rows of men lying under the eaves of buildings, the water pouring down upon their bodies in streams. Most of the operating tables were places in the open where the light was best, some of them partially protected against rain by tarpaulins or blankets stretched upon poles. There stood the surgeons, their sleeves rolled up to the elbows, their bare arms as well as their linen aprons smeared with blood, their knives not seldom held between their teeth, while they were helping a patient on or off a table or had their hands otherwise occupied, unknown at that time. As a wounded man was lifted onto the table, often shrieking with pain as the attendants handled him, the surgeon quickly examined the wound and resolved upon cutting off the injured limb. Some other was administered and the body put in position in a moment. The surgeon snatched his knife from between his teeth, where it had been while his hands were busy, and wiped it rapidly once or twice across his blood-stained apron, and then the cutting began. The operation accomplished, the surgeon would look around with a deep sigh, and then, next. And so it went on, hour after hour, while the number of expectant patients seemed hardly to diminish.
So from that letter from Carl Schurz, you can really tell what the medical situation was back then.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible.
Yeah, the medical knowledge and equipment was hardly up to the challenge posed by all the wounds and infections, like all their illnesses like typhoid fever and pneumonia, mumps and measles and tuberculosis.
And it just,
all that.
yeah, it spread so easily. I mean, they used the same tools in every surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they would go cut off someone's leg, and then they would use that same saw to cut off someone else's leg.
Mm-hmm.
It was nasty.
And not only that, they struggled to, get them to one place to another, like their wounded people, which was inadvertently sacrificing more lives to mere disorganization.
Seriously. It didn't help that when they did get somewhere, they were just so crammed together in their little camps that, one person's disease would just jump to the other and to the other, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone would get it. Seriously. 2/3 of the people who died during the Civil War was caused by disease. It wasn't even in battle. It was
Mm-hmm.
afterwards or before.
Mm-hmm. So they were trying to fix the problem with all the diseases going on in the war. They created the U.S. Sanitary Commission in 1861.
Yeah, in June.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really cool, because a lot of people don't know that that's just 2 months after the war started. And
Mm-hmm.
so they got right on the problem. They just arranged this thing that they thought would work, but
Mm-hmm.
it didn't.
Because they realized that, most of the deaths were coming from wounds and disease instead of, just
Mm-hmm.
being killed in battle.
They tried, what this thing was about is the U.S. Sanitary Commission encouraged, clean water, good food, fresh air. They even talked about, building these hospitals, these large ventilated hospitals in the battle. And then they tried to get women to join the new nursing corps that they created, so they'd have nurses to take care of the wounded.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's in the middle of battle. It's kind of difficult to do. So then there's this guy, Jonathan Letterman.
Known as the father of battlefield medicine.
He devised the system, which everyone called the Jonathan Letterman system. It was a system of forward first aid stations all throughout the battle.
And he also established all the mobile field hospitals and ambulances.
Mm-hmm. His system was eventually established as the procedure for intake and treatment of battlefield casualties for the U.S. armies.
Mm-hmm.
So Jonathan Letterman is a really good example of how much we got from the Civil War now.
Mm-hmm. Especially the ambulances, because their system of getting them to one place to another was so poor before, it was just killing them right off.
Yeah, it was they would kind of leave them in battle, maybe drag them off later, but the ambulances picked them up and brought them to the hospitals as fast as they could. And also the nursing corps. Civil War invented nursing.
Mm-hmm.
They got all these women to join in the Civil War and help these guys, as doctors. And then, anesthesia.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That's a big one. they didn't really have it back then as much as we do
No.
now. But like they would use chloroform to knock him out, and then they do surgery on him. Or, they would.
They would rely on
Yeah.
surgical shock.
So I think that's so creepy
Mm-hmm.
that they would like, they just rely on your heartbeat being really high. It just makes you cringe.
Yeah.
They like keep you awake and then cut your leg off while your heartbeat's
Mhm.
really high.
So yeah, everything in the Civil War, like their sanitation, it was terrible, but it was the start of everything else.
Oh yeah, like all this stuff that we have now, a lot of it came from that. The ambulances, the nursing, anesthesia, it all started during the Civil War. And now our medical department is so much better now because of how far they came in the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.